Is X, formerly known as Twitter, whitelisting controversial right-wing accounts? I did a short video on this yesterday, and it really deserves a longer video. So I'm in a hotel room in Sydney, Australia right now. I've spent the past few days giving speeches about misinformation and disinformation to both Australian first responders and later the Department of Defense of Australia. And I finally found a free day today, so I'm doing a video. I guess I just don't know how to have fun. So on Thursday, July 25th, Sydney time, or maybe Wednesday, the 24th US time, a graphic popped up from a Twitter account called the Antifa Turtle. This account has since been suspended. The graphic alleged that certain conservative or right-leaning accounts were exempt from Twitter rules. In programming terms, this would be called a whitelist, or a list of approved stuff. Note that a list of disapproved stuff would be called a blacklist. Now, I made a video where I listed some reasons why I thought this video was fake, and I'm going to walk through some of those reasons a little more in detail. But first, I want to talk about emotional truth. Back in the mid-2000s or so, Stephen Colbert coined a term called truthiness, and that is what you feel in your heart to be true, even if there's no proof. I like to use the term emotional truth, which is what you feel to be true rather than what the facts will support. And I think this is the reason this graphic gains so much traction, because if a social media post has emotional truth to you and you really want to believe that it's true, it's really easy for even smart people to ignore facts and logic, especially if the post supports your political views. So some people asked me if the post was DIP, or deceptive imagery persuasion. Technically, no. DIP is where you take a truthful or out-of-context picture and add text to it to lead someone toward a guided conclusion. For example, this post about Betty White in her 20s. The woman in color is Betty White, but these other women in black and white are not Betty White. But we all want to believe it, because who doesn't like Betty White? We want to think she was gorgeous in her 20s. So this particular graphic isn't DIP. I think it's something called an active measure, which is essentially a propaganda operation. Russia often engages in active measures, although I don't really have any proof that this was from Russia. The funny part is that Twitter has been putting manipulated media tags wherever this image pops up. And I find this hilarious because I find manipulated media on Twitter all the time. Remember that whole Israel's dropping booby-trapped cans of meat in Gaza video that I proved was fake? Those cans turned out to be landmine fuses, which Israeli soldiers left on the ground. That video is still showing up without the manipulated media tag, which tells me that Twitter has the ability to identify manipulated media when it wants to. And I guess that manipulated media just makes money and creates engagement, which is why they might not put that tag on things that they're not afraid of. And, for some reason, Twitter just does not like the idea of this particular graphic getting any traction. Now, I wouldn't want that either, especially if it's not real. But again, this is where emotional truth comes in. From an emotional standpoint, I have no doubt that Twitter has some kind of system where certain accounts are exempt from normal rules. But I'll explain how they probably do that in a moment. Now, the allegation was that this particular item came from the Twitter API, and I defined API in my short video. I said API stands for Abstract Programming Interface, and I was actually wrong about that, and a number of people corrected me. I actually Googled this, and API stands for Application Programming Interface, not Abstract Programming Interface. And the funny part is that I've been programming since the mid-90s, and I've been programming professionally since the mid-2010s, and apparently I've been saying it wrong for 30 years and nobody's ever corrected me. But of course, you never actually say Application Programming Interface. You just say, hey, where's the API? So here's the basics of how an API works. APIs are typically written by a software vendor to allow third parties to gain access to some of their features. For example, let's say you are a metro service, like a subway service. You might publish the next time the train will arrive at the station, and people who want to develop navigation apps can use that information to predict the time it's going to take to travel a certain route. The API gives developers instructions on how to get that information. Typically, this is received from something called an endpoint, which will accept requests and then send back responses. The response can be sent back a number of ways, although it's often done using a format called JSON or JavaScript Object Notation, which is a standard way of communicating information. And that's the first thing that kind of smells. This particular text is not formatted JSON. It's also not XML, which is an older and more verbose way of transmitting information. A real JSON file might look something like this. Now, looking at this file, it certainly seems like it's some kind of formatting, but I'm not sure why an organization like Twitter would reinvent the wheel when JSON works just fine and it's not very verbose, at least not as verbose as XML. And most software packages already come with a way of encoding and decoding JSON. So the other thing here that makes this suspicious is I'm not sure why you would use a text file to control this information. Twitter processes about 5,200 tweets per second. So if you're making a call to a text file to check the whitelist every time someone makes a tweet, that's incredibly inefficient. Now, this file could be used as some sort of file which is updated periodically and it just exists in memory. So when you restart the Twitter service, it grabs this file and loads it into memory. That's a possibility, but I don't know why anyone would do it this way. It would make more sense to flag these specific users in a database. That would be way faster since you're going to check the database every time you make a post anyway. And you would also be able to make changes on the fly that would instantly be updated without having to update a service that goes and grabs a text file. That just doesn't make any sense. Now, one other thing, just because I don't think it makes any sense doesn't mean some Twitter programmer did it early on and they've just been doing it that same way, because it's easier to keep doing it that way than actually fix it. That happens in software all the time. But then there's another problem. This whitelist is a really small list. You know, it's mainly made up of conservative or right-leaning accounts, almost like this list is designed to trigger and enrage people on the left. And I would venture to say that a real whitelist would have the names of prominent politicians as well, so that in the event of a crisis or facts about a disaster or an emergency, those wouldn't be accidentally suppressed. Like, if this was a real whitelist, I would expect to see world leaders or maybe the Red Cross on that whitelist as well. I would also expect to see figures like the Argentinian president, Javier Milei, on there, and he isn't. So it's almost like this document was designed to appeal to a very specific demographic in the United States and only use the most enraging accounts, so that way they aren't cluttered up with more realistic accounts like Javier Milei or global leaders. Now, the next issue is Okta. Okta is not a whitelist. It's an authenticator. It's something you would use when logging into something to verify that you are who you say you are, or you're authorized to log in. It wouldn't make any programming sense to keep that kind of sensitive information on Okta, and I'm not sure Okta even has the ability to do so even if you wanted to. Finally, I believe that this element here is actually a misspelling of Tristan Tate, also known as Tate the Talisman. This is the brother of internet provocateur Andrew Tate. And this is another reason why I think this is fake, because why would you spell a user incorrectly in the whitelist? That's exactly why you would use a database. You would use a special field on that database saying, hey, whitelist this guy. You wouldn't use a text file where you could have a misspelling. You know, if you're setting a flag in a database, you're never going to be, well, you could be wrong, but you're less likely to misspell something if you're using a structured query language or SQL to say, hey, set this flag to this certain level of permission. Although there is an actual user named Tate the Railman, so maybe this file was talking about them. Still, I kind of think this is a mistake because the R and the T keys are right next to each other on a keyboard. All right, so what does this all mean? I mean, I don't think this file is real. It smells. I believe this is some kind of active measure for the left wing, or perhaps just some internet troll. And like I've always said, if something makes you feel emotional, you shouldn't share it. You're probably being manipulated. And one last thing before I go. A bunch of Air Mobility Command guys reached out to me. These are the Air Force guys who fly and maintain cargo planes and tankers. It's not as romantic as fighter planes, but it is just as crucial. Well, the Air Mobility Command people asked for their own bunker branding shirt, sticker, and hoodie. So here it is. Alcoholics Moving Cargo. You can find that at bunkerbranding.com. And if anyone can get a picture of them wearing one of these shirts or hoodies inside a C-17 or KC-46, I would love to post it. And hey, don't forget about my short story, Warlock. That's out for Kindle. It's about an Irish traveler with a very special gift who teams up with the FBI to find the most wanted man in the world. You can find that and the link to Bunker Branding below. Thank you guys for watching.
Hey everyone! New Ryan McBeth t-shirts and hoodies from Bunker Branding are available. I'm gonna get the HIMARS shirt. What are you gonna get, Donald? The Patriot shirt, because I'm a patriot. It's the best shirt, the biggest shirt. Make 14 tangos great again. What are you gonna get, Barack? Let me be clear. I'm gonna get a Drone Sweet Drone shirt. What about you, George?
I'm gonna get a Try That Missile shirt because they're weapons of mass destruction.
Oh, I'm going to get a landmine marker shirt because my presidency always blew up in my face.
I'll tell you what I'm going to get.
Ronald Reagan, but you're dead.
I came back to tell you that no matter our politics, we're all Americans. And we should buy Ryan's hoodies and t-shirts because they pay for the stock footage and licenses that allow him to make awesome content. So come on down to Bunker Branding and buy a Ryan McBeth t-shirt or I'll start the bombing in 5 minutes.